Hello Pisces and welcome. Thank you for joining me for your year 2020 forecast. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please also click or tap on the bell notification alert. This year begins in sensational fashion for you. We have a solar return and all the key planets are lined up and they're going to provide a backdrop for the whole of your year. But one of the most notable standout features is the fact that the moon, which is how we relate at an emotional level and how we absorb and how we are receptive to others, is conjunct your co-ruler of Neptune. This is going to give you an enormous amount of sensitivity this year, but also compassion and an ability to really relate to people in almost an unspoken way at times. It is true when Neptune is beside the moon that there can be a shimmering haze. There can be times when you could feel a little bit uncertain, but the key to this year is going to be trusting your instincts. And if you do, they won't fail you. But also, Mars, the planet of drive, of determination, of passion, that's in the expansive 9th house, your sister water sign of Scorpio. And that suggests that travel is going to be very important to you this year. And I think because of the Moon-Neptune conjunction, you're going to be able to soak up experiences like never before this year. But then in the sign of Capricorn, there continues to be a lot of action. Of course, Pluto's been here since 2008, joined over the last couple of years by Saturn. And Saturn and Pluto have been broadly conjunct as we start this year for about 9 months, within 3 degrees. Now that has been a more challenging transit because Saturn is about restriction, it's about grit, it's about limitation, and Pluto's about change. And it's possible that there have been some changes around your friendship group and potentially also around your future hopes and wishes. But as we begin this year, your other co-ruler of Jupiter, which is very spiritual, is in a conjunction which is very positive to Mercury, the planet of communication in the sign of Capricorn. But it's not just that this is going to give you a wonderful vibrancy when you communicate your ideas to others. They're both linking to Uranus, the planet of surprises, which is in a very switched on part of your scope, your 3rd solar house. And it's a very innovative influence here. So your way of reaching out to people can really be quite exciting all through this year. Now it's true to say that Saturn and Pluto are still very close together as we begin this year. And by the 12th, they come into an exact conjunction. That's potent. So there may be a process around something that was in your past in quite a big way is making way for something more significant for your future. But just to understand that Venus, the planet of love and affection, which loves going through your zodiac sign, is actually in a very tender part of your chart as this year begins. And it could make you pretty nostalgic at times this year, but it also can see you wanting to potentially change where you live, and in quite a major way. And the key time that change is going to occur is probably from the 4th of April through to the 7th of August, because then Venus will have moved on but be making an extended transit through the sign of Gemini, which for you is where you feel most comfortable, at peace and tranquil. Now this can come from a love of material comfort, it can come from being in a very remote, secluded place, or it could come, if it suits you, to be somewhere busy. It just depends. But where you live is almost certainly going to evolve or improve on the back of that transit. But Venus being in the 12th house is also enhanced by the midpoint between the moon in your sign and the sun in Capricorn. And that midpoint is right beside Venus. I think, therefore, there's going to be quite a lot of thinking this year about how you relate to other people. Now, it can be in a friendly group dynamic that comes through the energy of Capricorn, or it can be in a more deeply personal way, which comes much more through this Aquarius Venus position. So I think it's going to be a very fascinating year for you in that regard. But Chiron, the comet, which is to do with the wounded healer, is just tucked up in your sector of self-worth. And at the very start of the year, it's alongside Black Moon Lilith, which is very much to do with our hidden desires. And if there is something that you're not accessing because of some conditioning from your past, and it could be a relationship, then this combination is asking you to act upon that this year. But because of the location of Venus and that midpoint, I think the way you go about it may be quite discreet. And if you do meet someone new this year, it's going to be someone who has a very gentle vibe, where you feel that you can really trust them to be absolutely yourself, even your most vulnerable self. But let's go back to that energy in the sign of Capricorn. Because, as I say, it has been quite bruising at times over the last couple of years, potentially. But we also have a big switch that occurs on the 3rd of January, when Mars moves out of Scorpio and into the most prominent and dominant part of your scope. And if you have set yourself the target of improving your professional position as you enter into this new year, perhaps with a New Year's resolution, Mars is going to fire you up almost straight away. It's exciting stuff. But your ability to get on with people, and remember, Neptune conjunct your moon will give you a huge sixth sense, is really going to be so important to any professional progress. It will help you to sense the kind of environment where you can thrive and where you probably couldn't. So don't be guided only by the material attraction of any benefits. But that brings us through to the 10th, when we have an annular lunar eclipse in the sign of Cancer. Now, Cancer energy is very, very important, not least because of this eclipse, but also because the North Node, the point of destiny, which is like the emotional tug of the heavens, has been in Cancer for much of last year. And for you, this is a marvellous location because it's about your self-expression. But it just so happens that opposing the North Node and also this very powerful eclipse is going to be the energy of Saturn. And Saturn is harsh, it's limiting, and it's also alongside in Capricorn, not just the Sun, not just Pluto, but also Ceres, which is the asteroid of nurturing. And in Capricorn, it's not at its best. It's very stoic, but it's kind of a bit inhibited. So it may mean that with the position of Venus at the start of this year, even if some of the planets are speaking to you to be more progressive about your friendships, you could be a bit fearful in the first 6 months of this year. But there's going to be lots of support for you as this year develops. And that support really starts to shape up. On the 12th, we have the absolute conjunction between Saturn and Pluto. And some astrologers are speaking of the potential for something quite major to happen in the world. Some kind of realignment. If we think Saturn is structure, Pluto is change. But Pluto is neat, really unconstituted power. It can be so ruthless. And Saturn can be so limiting and oppressive. So the two together in the very conservative sign of Capricorn really is quite a thing. But I think that energy has actually been going on, as I say, for about 9 months, and it's going to peak by the middle of February, just before the Sun makes its way into your sign. And I think it's going to start to be more liberating for us all. But on the 14th of January, Venus moves into your sign. And I think that you're going to start to build up more confidence almost straight away. Now, Mercury replaces Venus in the sign of Aquarius on the 17th. There's still stuff that you're going to be thinking about, reflecting quietly. and also the sun moves on the 21st, and then there's a new moon on the 24th, and all of this for you is very tender stuff. It's delicate. It's picking over the things that perhaps relate to your past, or the shadow side of your nature that you're less comfortable with, or who are the people that do have opposition to you, and why do they have opposition? If you can confront this, it can be hugely cathartic. If you just push it away, or have lifestyle choices which see you evading looking at who you deeply are, or you find it difficult to embrace your vulnerabilities and share it with other people, all this energy in Aquarius is asking you to think again. But as this month comes to a close, so Mars goes into a tricky right angle with Neptune in your sign. So if you are formulating those big plans, those ambitious plans, you need to be sure, especially with all this 12th house stuff going on, that you're crystal clear on why you're doing it, on what your objective is, and what the true benefit is. And again, I take you back to that central point. Be guided all this year by your gut feeling. It won't let you down. Now, there are two very, very big transits this year. The first is Jupiter conjunct Pluto. I've already told you about Venus going through the sign of Gemini. But in the second 6 months of this year, Mars, the planet of passion, is going to be in your second house. And if you really like good things and nice things, and you want to really embrace those things, whether it's very natural, earthy living, being in touch with organics, growing your own vegetables, living in quite a simple way, or it is through a more glamorous way, perhaps it will be that new home that you're going to make sure is really shining like a pin with pristine, lovely possessions. And all that is going to be something you can orientate your energies towards in the second half of this year. Which brings us to the end of January, and I've set the stage for you with the solar return, and now we enter into February. As February begins, so Mercury moves into the sign of Pisces, joining up with Neptune and Venus already there in your sign. Mercury moves absolutely on the 3rd. But it is true by the 8th, Venus relocates into Aries, but that can be fabulous if you're hoping to get some kind of improvement to come through into your financial situation. But Mercury is very much about thinking and also articulating our ideas. And in the first house, along with Neptune, Neptune is giving you the push to be imaginative, and Mercury can see you structuring that imagination in the way you go about your plans. But it is important to remember that Mercury will go retrograde on the 17th. So whatever you plan, particularly before Venus moves, and if it is of a particularly creative nature, just factor in that it may not necessarily turn out this way later into this month, and it will be the 29th of March before Mercury finally comes out of shadow. So there could be quite a big process to go through of considering an idea. It's then going to invert back into Aquarius at the start of March, so just bear that in mind. Now on the 9th we do have a full moon. This full moon occurs in Leo, which for you is very much about the practicalities of life. But Uranus is going to be dissecting the Sun in Aquarius and Uranus in Leo in a T-square. And I think this suggests that there could be a desire to splash out some money spontaneously, and especially with Venus moving into this location as well. If there is an item that you've had your eyes on for some while, it may be rather hard to resist it in the following 2 weeks. But the 6th, 9th house axis, which is being stimulated by this full moon, is also asking you to be aware of not ingesting the wrong things to prop up your morale if you are feeling a little bit low or a little bit more sensitive in your energies. Now on the 16th, there is an excellent change for your sign. Mars bursts into the sign of Capricorn, where it's exalted to begin a 6-week occupation. Now obviously it's going to be going over some of those key planets that already are in Capricorn. So it's going to be very stimulating, this, but particularly to do with your future plans and your friendships. The 18th is a great moment in the whole year because Saturn and Jupiter start to separate in the conjunction that I see has been there for about 11 months within 3 degrees. Saturn being in your 11th solar house, as I have mentioned, may have seen some real changes in your friendship group, but also in terms of the things that really inspire you. You may have become much more serious about certain strands and less frivolous about others. But the 19th is a moment to really savour because then the sun moves into your sign. It's going to be supportive of Mercury's retrograde, and it is the green light to really get going on anything that has been in the back of your mind, but there could still be this stop-start dimension that comes from the energy of Mercury. The new moon, which occurs on in your sign on the 23rd, however, could see you thinking about a fresh new look, a makeover in some way. You can dazzle people with your individuality. Also, this new moon embraces the energy of Black Moon Lilith, which is inverting back from its original point just at the start of Aries at the beginning of the year. This conjunction suggests that maybe you should be a bit more daring about what marks you out as an individual. If you do, you could find that it is really enhancing to your morale, being a bit more edgy in your approach, not necessarily being quite so worried about what other people think. Now Mars is going to be forging a brilliant angle to both the Sun and also Uranus as this month draws to a close. So if you have got a big idea and you are sure that it feels right, then this could be a time to really take some dramatic and confident steps forwards. As the month comes to a close, also Sun in your sign meets the retreating Mercury. So you can have some real eureka moments and may wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my word, that would be absolutely brilliant. So it does end February with a real opportunity to be more creative and more imaginative in your approach. As I mentioned before, Mercury inverses back into Aquarius on the 4th of March. But on the 5th, there's a fantastic moment for you because Venus moves out of your sector of resources and more sensual appreciation into your sector of everyday communications. But it links immediately with Uranus. Uranus is going to be such an important influence all through this year. So this suggests that you could have a sudden connection with someone where you really get one another, and it can be very exciting, and they could be quite different in some ways. Perhaps you're going to assert your individuality in terms of the way you dress or the way you speak, or perhaps you'll want to spring a surprise on an existing partner. But it's a really very epithescent conjunction and very lively for you. Now from the 9th of March through to the 4th of December, so a giant transit, we have that Jupiter and Pluto conjunction that I mentioned before. And this is really going to be potentially uplifting. You could find that your faith in personkind is restored by this. Of course, as ever, life is never a completely straight road. There are often bumps. But I think this is just going to see you embracing the more idealistic side of your nature, which is strong, but you can also be very realistic as well. That's often missed by astrologers, but you can be very focused on what's essential. But this is just encouraging you to perhaps look towards new groups of people if there have been some casualties that have come through Saturn's bruising transit through your 11th house. Now on the 9th, there's a full moon in your opposite sign. So If there is a relationship where the other person feels that you've been too focused on what's important for you, they could remind you of their presence over the following 2 weeks. Also, this full moon links in with Jupiter and Pluto, so it can be an opportunity to get a better idea of the midpoint between your needs and the needs of those that you're close to. And Jupiter and Pluto in conjunction could see you gaining new knowledge or new insights in order to do this. The 10th sees Mercury go forward in Aquarius, which will see you let out a sigh of relief. If you have been feeling a bit anxious about something or unsure about someone's reliability, I think this change will help. And then on the 16th, Mercury does come back into your sign. So that process of indecision, of not being quite sure, and maybe testing something out and revising it, will finally come to a conclusion on the 29th of March as Mercury comes out of shadow and returns to the place where the retrograde first began. Now, on the 20th, we have the Vernal Equinox and the start of the new Western celestial year, which is based on the seasons, not on fixed constellations. So this important point also sees the sun pass into the sign of Aries. And immediately it's going to link with Chiron, that wounded healer. If there is a sense with you that your sense of self-esteem or self-worth is not quite as robust as it could be, the sun can be very encouraging in its transit over this point. Saturn also moves on the 22nd into Aquarius. This is your 12th solar house, but I don't think this year it's going to have a marked effect on your sign. If you're born in the early part of Pisces, Saturn moving into this location can actually be very good for you because it's forging a semi-sextile. It only really goes up to nearly 1 degree of Aquarius before retreating and then returning to Capricorn on the 1st of July. So I think unless you are born more towards the end of Pisces, then there is going to be a square. So if you're in the last couple of days of Pisces, I think you might feel this energy this year. And essentially, it is really still that issue to do with friends and future direction that is going to be playing out, particularly with Saturn being in the sign of friendship for this period of time. However, on the 24th, the new moon in Aries can see you feeling much more enthusiastic about what you can do around your financial circumstances. You've already had that uplift that came from Venus's transit through this part of your situation, but the sun is the most serious influence, so you can find yourself much more productive if you are wanting to improve your lot. And also with Mars moving into Aquarius on the 31st of this month, this is quite significant, I think, particularly again if you're born towards the end of Pisces or right at the beginning. If it's right at the beginning, you can structure something that's important to you really effectively as you make your way into April, the first 5 days. If you're towards the end of Pisces, this could be a point where there are some frustrations or limitations in your professional situation which could close in on you somewhat, and you might find a little bit testing. Just also be aware this month, Pisces, that between the 5th and the 11th, the sun will go alongside Neptune in your sign. So if you just go through a dip of vitality in those days, don't get too fretful about it. It is a temporary transit, and it could make you actually very compassionate, but just slow down your desire to get things done in a more practical way. As you come into April, well, on the 4th, Venus moves, as I flagged before, into the sign of Gemini. And this is going to go on for 4 long months. And this is very much about your home environment. And you could find yourself, even if you're someone who's quite sociable and outgoing, wanting to have some moments of reflection during this time, even if it is just spending more time in nature or quietly meditating or just being very gentle to yourself. If you enjoy home crafts, you could be very productive with this influence. Or it could be you could make your own clothes or soft furnishings. There almost certainly for Pisces is going to be change around your home. So whether it is making it more beautiful and comfortable, or your garden, or you decide to move altogether, it is really significant, this. Now from the 5th to the 11th, Mercury back in your sign is forging a great link with Jupiter and Pluto. So this is going to help you to think clearly, but articulate it to others, the group, in a way which is unifying. Sometimes the group want different things from us, but you can get a nice balance between your own individual agenda and what others expect from you. There is a full moon on the 8th in the sign of Libra, and this one's tricky because it does square up to Jupiter and Pluto. So this is essentially suggesting that when it comes to those resources, it's probably not the best of time over the next 2 weeks to be too hale and hearty about sharing the resources you've got, particularly around your friendship group. If there is someone you really like, avoid grand gestures. Being generous to a fault, Sun square Jupiter, is actually a good aspect. Well, put it this way, it's surely better than being mean to a fault. So this could stimulate you to do something for a good cause, make some kind of donation, but again, keep it within the bounds that you feel really comfortable with. This could, however, be a little bit of a touch and go point, this 2-week period, around your friendships. If there is someone who just doesn't share your values, it can become more visible to you with the energy of Pluto and the knowledge of Jupiter bringing this information to the surface. Perhaps somebody quite wise and protective of you is going to give you some good advice around your resources, but also flag up someone who's perhaps not maybe as respectful as your position as they could be. On the 11th, Mercury moves into Aries, joining up with Chiron, that comet, which is very much to do with healing. Again, you can think for about a week about how you can feel better and stronger about yourself, or you can put firmer foundations down, and it may be linked to that plan for some kind of change in the home environment. Now, the first 5 days of this month, of course, have seen Mars and Saturn together. So there is the potential for a bit of frustration if something isn't shaping up as quickly as it could do. But this aspect can also see you working feverishly hard on something that's important. The key is not spreading your focus, really narrowing it to the things that are really important. Week 3 this month sees a great link between Mercury and Mars. So not only can you think great ideas, you can walk the talk. And again, I think other people are going to be very receptive to you. The Sun's moving on the 20th into Taurus, joins up with Uranus, and then the new moon on the 23rd is also being really influenced by this very unpredictable, edgy but enlivening energy that is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So Uranus energy is buzzing things up. If you're interested in technology, or perhaps grabbing yourself a new mode of transport, cycling, quite frankly, could become very captivating for you at this time, or more vigorous walking, or just doing exercise that's fun and maybe even a little bit crazy in some ways. But the more mental stimulation that you get at this point of the year, the better. Now, the 25th does see Pluto go into a retrograde, and just expect through to the 4th of October that some of your friendship or future hope situations may just slow down. They're not necessarily going to be banned, it's just a slowing down. The 28th sees Mercury joining up with the Sun in the sign of Taurus and Uranus, of course, and it immediately links with Uranus too. So your mind is really going to be stepping up a gear as April comes to a close, and you'll likely be needing to engage with people who really switch on your thinking and you find fun, but also very bright and intelligent. If there is anyone in your circle that you find a little bit dull, this is probably not the time that you'll spend so much with them. As you make your way into May, Jupiter and Pluto are still conjunct, the Sun and Mercury and Uranus still in the earthy sign of Taurus, which for you is very much about mental stimulation. But there's a big change on the 5th. The North Node, the point of destiny, which is like an emotional tug, is going to inverse into the sign of Gemini. Gemini energy is bright, it's breezy, it's sociable, but for you it's your 4th solar house. So it's an enhancement of Venus's journey, extended journey through the sign of Gemini. And I think it just points towards you really finding a greater sense of peace and tranquility and security in your home and closest relationships for the rest of this year. However, on the 7th, we do have a full moon, probably one of the most potent of the whole year. Yes, it's in Scorpio. Scorpio, that influence which is very much to do with transformation, but also being a little bit more hidden. It's not necessarily upfront and out there with its vibe. But this particular full moon sees Mercury alongside the Sun. So I think there could be quite a lot of information exchanged in the next couple of weeks, especially if you are actively talking about or planning some kind of change in your world. And if you can use the logic of Mercury to offset the intensity and passion of the moon in Scorpio, do. It's going to be a very interesting full moon for us all, I feel. On the 11th, Saturn begins its retrograde in Aquarius, which is going to accumulate with it moving back into Capricorn on the 1st of July. This is going to be the last of 3 retrogrades affecting this particular planet, and I think by the end of its process you and all of us will be letting a sigh of relief out. However, on the 12th, Mercury moves into Gemini, joining up with the North Node and Venus, and this can see you thinking carefully about your home. One of the downsides of Mercury going through the 4th house in anyone's chart is it can see us circulating thoughts without actually processing them outwards. So we can tend to keep them in a little bit. It's a very Cancerian kind of influence. So if you do find yourself recycling a particular theme or concern, do share it with a trusted confidant or family member. It will make you feel better. Don't keep it close to your chest. The 13th, however, is a marvellous moment for you because Mars moves into your sign, where it's going to be for the next 6 weeks. And this is an opportunity for you to really flourish when it comes to being much sparkier and much more motivated. And some of the emotional debris that was being stirred up by Mars's transit through Aquarius is soon going to settle down. You're going to become much more purposeful and single-minded with this change. However, on the 13th too, Venus does go into retrograde. So if you are looking to buy a property and there's some conveyancing involved, just be aware that charm and diplomacy will probably do you more good than getting too frustrated at what can be a stressful time if that's something you're contemplating. But on the 14th, Jupiter also goes into a retrograde. So now we've got Pluto and Jupiter together, both slowing down. And the next 4 months will, I feel, suggest that something that is important to you might not go quite at the speed that you would like or expect. So if you lower your expectations, then you can work within the speed that these retrogrades are set in and not get so exasperated. On the 21st, the Sun moves also into Gemini, supporting Mercury, supporting the North Node, supporting Venus. So really is an important time to think about your foundations. You may find yourself pausing a little bit and actually wanting to have some time away from others and just reflecting about what you really do want. This is a time that can be very healing and recuperative, especially if you enjoy being at home anyway. But if you do get some walks in nature or some time to just really reminisce and think about some of the ideas and conditioning that you were given as a child and how that's working out for you in the here and now can be a very powerful part of the process. The new moon, which occurs on the 22nd, does forge a link with Saturn, the retreating Saturn in Aquarius. I think what this is saying to you is that although you may be thinking about those home considerations, there could be some things that you need to plan behind the scenes. And Saturn in that respect can be very helpful to you in this regard. However, on the 29th, Mercury moves into Cancer, which is brilliant for you because this is your 5th house, so it's more to do with outward self-expression and thinking. It can be your sense of humour revives, but the transit through Cancer can be a bit watery and get a bit bogged down, but generally speaking, a really vibrant end to the end of May for you. As you come into June, a month which is going to be hugely powerful because of 2 eclipses, it's true that the Sun is in conjunction with the retreating Venus. If you do view somewhere that you really like as a future abode, you could really fall in love with it on the back of this particular influence. If you meet someone for the first time, they're likely to be someone who's got a gentleness to them or nurturing part of their nature, or someone you meet through your family, or someone that you've got some knowledge of already, and there's a sense of familiarity or shared kind of simpatico about where you both come from. And on the 5th, then we have the annular eclipse, and this lunar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius is going to be forging a square to Mars in your sign. And this becomes really much more obvious from the 9th to the 17th, when also Mars in your sign is going to be combining with Neptune. If you are really determined to thrust forwards at this time, you could find that you get some mixed signals and messages from other people, or you could come down with a bit of a cold or feel sort of a bit demotivated. It's not a great time to be over imbibing on that particular week. And in the first 3 weeks of this month, the Sun's clash with Mars suggests that as much as you may have a clear plan of what you want to achieve, it may not be what other people want. And also with the first 10 days, Mercury in sextile to Uranus, your mental capacity is going to be sparkling, so the more acting it outside of it, if you are frustrated, that's going to be instantly a bit difficult to deal with. So just anticipate that from the 9th to the 17th, your energy and motivation could dip down somewhat. On the 18th, Mercury goes into retrograde in Cancer. If you have been planning a date or a social event, the next couple of weeks could see a cancellation, change of plan, something occurred that you weren't anticipating. But as ever with Mercury retrograde, we can't control everything, but we can control the things we can personally influence. So making sure paperwork is done well, communicating as effectively as possible, understanding how other people view us, all these things are still going to be very important. The 21st, however, is a real lovely change for you because we have a solar eclipse. It's an annular solar eclipse in the most self-expressive part of your scope. So for the next 6 months, this really is the green light, the celestial permission to really demonstrate to people just how talented and clever and imaginative and characterful that you can be. If you do want to add greater zing and zest to your social life, this is seeing you emerging somewhat from the more inward energies of Gemini and into the sunlight. Now, the 25th also sees Venus ending a retrograde. So if you have been waiting to hear some news or haven't quite made your mind up about what you want to do about your home, things can speed up. Now, Mars also moves on the 28th of this month into Aries, which is great for your financial resources. So I flagged this at the start of your forecast. For the second half of this year, you really can make a difference to your earnings. And that can make you feel a lot better about yourself too. But of course, life isn't just about the material plane. And Mars in this sector can also be about sensuality. So if you feel unfulfilled romantically, the fact that you've got this solar eclipse and Mars in this lusty area is certainly going to be interesting for you in the months ahead. Now, July is going to see some powerful oppositions between Jupiter and the Sun in Cancer, and then Pluto and the Sun in Cancer, and finally Saturn and the Sun. And I think that final change might actually be the grittiest and most challenging. The month begins, however, with Saturn retreating back into Capricorn. So this can, I think, for all Pisces people, just make you a bit more mindful from now until the 16th of December about where you're heading and the type of people that you're sharing your life with. If there is a real sense of unity and shared purpose, this is actually going to be a retrograde that you will deal with well in Capricorn because of all the lessons you've learnt over the last couple of years as it's been making its way through this sign. But the 5th does see an annular lunar eclipse in Capricorn, and just the place that Saturn has moved to, and of course where you have the retrogrades to Jupiter and also Pluto. So it's about your future plans. If you don't feel your heart is in a future plan, check out. Do what's good for your heart. If we go right back to the start of your year and the solar return, that Neptune conjunct Moon position in your sign was so vital that you did not go against your sixth sense. So continue to embrace that as this overlay 6-month eclipse unfolds. But the Sun, of course, continues in the bright and sparkly, for you, Cancer. But it does come into a opposition from the 11th through to the 16th with Jupiter, which actually can be lovely. You could be very, very exuberant during that period of time and be a larger than life character, and people might actually be really tempted to connect with you. Also on the 12th, Mercury ends a retrograde in Cancer, which is something you'll really feel pleased about as well, because things speed up, someone you haven't heard with gets in touch, and it all seems a lot jollier and happier. But I think from the 13th to the 18th, the Sun opposite Pluto is much more political. So if there is a friend or a group of people who see things very differently to you, and there has been some politics working around out of sight, it may become more visible. Someone could be quite dogmatic or forceful, overbearing, and also it's important to be conscious of your own approach too. The 20th, however, sees the new moon in Cancer, ordinarily sensational for you in the following month, but this one's opposite Saturn. So it could be that some kind of seriousness or somber vibe comes in. Perhaps you have come to the end of the road around one alliance and you're just really coming to terms with separating, cutting the cord and liberating yourself. That's really going to be from the 20th of July right through to the middle of August. So powerful stuff. And then on the 22nd, the Sun returns home to the sign of Leo. And this shines into your situation in terms of giving you a boost of vitality, but also the desire to get a bit more organised. If you're someone who's pretty good in that department, and Pisces people can be, then this is your chance to direct your energies in another part of your situation, perhaps through extra exercise, or perhaps nutrition might be an area that you can bring in some revisions and improvements. It is true that all through this month, Venus is forging a sparkling alliance with Mars. So for you, I feel if you are moving, or if there is somewhere you really like, you could be quite proactive on the financial side of things, but feeling very chipper because you can see how everything's shaping up for your future hopes. On the 26th of July, Mercury comes out of shadow, always welcome. So if there has been a stop-start on a social, romantic situation, there has been a clash of personalities, you can start to sort things out more. And one good way to do this is really use your sense of humour to try to levitate any tensions there may have been. As August begins, so we've got that position of the sun, which is very much to do with practicalities, health, fitness and diet for you, perhaps also to do with work. And you've got Mercury in a sector which helps you to think on your feet. Venus is still in an area which is very much to do with nurturing the basis of your foundations along with the North Node. But on the 3rd, we have a full moon in Aquarius, which is a mirror copy, if you like, in reverse of the full moon of the 9th of February, because it brings into play Uranus again. So something could come up over the next couple of weeks. It may be linked to your work. If you do feel a bit out of sorts, it's going to be important to use the transit of Mercury into Leo from the 5th to think of the ways in which you can improve your situation. Now, one of the best things to recognise about your own nature is that you can be so self-sacrificing, and that's a mightily wonderful quality. But there needs to be a kind of box that exists within, and those parameters mean that you can exist outside of those that commitment and that sacrifice in nature in a way which sees you flourish. So if something is out of sync around your giving and getting for you, and it could be linked to your nervous system, then do try to throttle back a little bit from the full moon of the 3rd for the next couple of weeks. On the 8th, however, Venus moves into Cancer, which is absolutely beautiful for you. So this brings to an end this 4-month transit in Gemini, but for the next 28 days, you can absolutely captivate people. Your charm and charisma are going to be turned up to max. Enjoy the attention. If you're single, this can be an enriching period of time for your relationships. Now, the first 10 days of this month do see Jupiter and Mars in a right angle. So when it comes to those longer term aims, if you are planning any moves that are financial, it's best not to go outside what you can absolutely definitely afford, because any kind of reckless moves with finance may prove entirely counterproductive. From the 5th to the 22nd, there's a much trickier right angle involving Mars, because this is with Pluto. These two are the scrappers of the zodiac, if you like, in terms of people being rather pugnacious. Mars in your 2nd house is making you stand up for your rights. Good for you, especially around money, but not so good for you if it goes against what's good taste, fair play, you take shortcuts, or it goes against the rights of others. But then it could work in entirely flip, and it could be someone who's trying to be unfair to you. So stand up for what you truly believe in, but also be very ethical in your approach to resources. On the 11th and through to the 21st, Mars forges a much nicer link to the Sun. And this suggests that you can be extremely productive in terms of coming up with practical and workable ways to improve your lot. This is going to be enhanced from the 19th for the following month with the new moon, because that also embraces the potent energy of Mars. So we get a nice balance between the Sun's neat and innate drive, Mars's determination, and the moon's sensitivity. On the 20th, Mercury moves into your opposite sign, followed on the 23rd by the Sun. So you move into a much more relating part of the year. Always a nice change, venture. It is true, as this month draws to a close, Venus does go into an opposition with Pluto, but that just flags up that there could be someone on your radar that you really fancy. But Venus and Pluto can see us being quite compulsive and driven by our desire, whether it is about lust or loot. So if there is someone you fancy, don't try too hard. And it's also true to say in the second half of this month, Mars does clash with Saturn. So Mars is a mightily powerful and potent energy all through this month. So I think this is basically saying to you that, again, stick to what's rightful, and also don't take any uncalculated risks around your resources. It is true in the last week, however, that Mercury and the Sun forge a gorgeous link with Pluto and Jupiter. So there really is a sense that if you're linking with the right people, as this month comes to a close, it could be quite magical, especially with one person in particular. So as September dawns, so relationships can be on your mind. But relationships take on many different guises. We can have, obviously, the close, personal, intimate tie. We can have those with our friends or our family or with ourselves even, in terms of our emotional being. And then, of course, there are the relationships we have to have with the people we don't necessarily like or get on with so well. And the seventh house, which the Sun and Mercury are travelling through now, they do define what's known as open enemies, the people you know you have to deal with and be a bit more competitive and gritty. So if you do need to put some boundaries down, don't be fearful of doing it, I think is the key. And all through this month, Mars does continue to grind its gears with Saturn. This is because Saturn's inversing and Mars is kind of getting to the point where they're connecting, and that's why it's extended over both August and September. Could create some frustrations if you are encountering someone who tends not to be very pleasant. And on the 6th, Venus moves into Leo. Venus loves being in Leo. If you want to get a job, your charm and awesome persuasiveness can really help. Mercury moves on the same day into Libra, which for you is deep, penetrative, investigative. And you could be finding out some crucial information over the next few weeks. On the 9th, Mars does go retrograde. So if there has been a lot of emphasis on the more material side of your situation, this is asking you to throttle back and not be too exasperated if things don't go exactly to plan. But Saturn square with Mars is flagging that need up anyway. Now on the 13th, we do have an entirely good news story because Jupiter goes forwards after its 4-month retrograde comes to a close. And this has been going on since the 14th of May. Jupiter's really going to give you an ace opportunity from now through to the 19th of December to really go for it on some kind of big hope or wish that you have, but not necessarily a material one. On the 16th, the new moon in your opposite sign is great for relationships, but there could be a little bit of politics emerging from the 19th to the 26th as Mercury goes into conflict with Pluto. When these two are in opposition or square, we can encounter a kind of might is right type of character who wags their fingers and always knows what's best. Really frustrating and irritating. But it's possible that, again, it's some kind of area where you want to be idealistic or do your best, but you may have to encounter someone else's behaviour that's much more earthly and not very edifying. Stand your ground. Don't let anyone push you around, particularly over a financial issue. However, the Sun does move into Libra on the 23rd. So if you do need to go through a period of transformation and letting go of anyone who's no longer appropriate for you, the next month is going to be a vital part of that. The 21st, however, is lovely because it sees Mercury climb into your sister water sign of Scorpio, which is all about expansion, travel, higher education. And if you are thinking about moving into an establishment which offers those that culture at this time, your timing is absolutely perfect as September comes to a close. The 29th, though, Saturn ends the retrograde. I told you when it was starting it. So this brings to a close the last of the 3 massive retrogrades that have occurred in Capricorn. This one was partially in Aquarius. And I think it's something to really savour. I truly do. And just think back over the last 2 and a quarter years and what's happened around some of your future hopes. You may have achieved some of them, but then others may have come through and superseded those original hopes. There may have been big changes around your friendship group and the group dynamic in your world, or maybe you've had to become much more realistic about the reality that is life at times, especially if you are a particularly spiritual type of Pisces person. Now, October sees 2 full moons. On the first day in the sign of Aries, your sector of resources, and the second occurs on the last day in the sign of Taurus, which is about how you think, speak and interact on a daily basis. This is known as a blue moon. We haven't had this since March 2018. So what does it mean for you? Well, you come into this month, I feel, in quite a transformational spell with the Sun in the 8th house, but also investigative with Mercury in Scorpio. And on the 3rd, with Venus moving into your sector of relating, it begins a 28-day period, which is quite magical for your potential relationships, because this brings a real chance to connect with someone who really understands where you're coming from, just in an instinctive way. But we have to be honest that because of Mars's retrograde and Pluto as well, they are now back in conflict. It started right at the end of September, the last 4 or 5 days. So for the first 3 weeks, this mighty clash goes on. Avoid debates which will not serve your greater good. So it could be about a points of principle. It could be about something that you have a real sense of faith and idealism in. But if you discuss it with a person who's just never ever going to see your viewpoint, it will just harm you. So it's picking your battles is going to be important. But Venus moving into your opposite sign can see you bring oodles of charm and harmonizing energies to bear, even if you do encounter some tricky characters. But the key here is that from the 8th to the 21st, the Sun in Libra is going to go into a succession of squares. Now, because Jupiter, Pluto and Saturn are obviously all in the 4th house for Libra, for you, this is an 8th, 11th house axis. So these period of clashes could stir up any issues of jealousy, manipulation, control, the dark arts, where people don't necessarily articulate how they feel, Pluto, the 8th house, maybe your hidden yearnings, desires, frustrations, angers. So these can really be stirred up this month. This cannot be denied. But the good news is that on the 14th, even though Mercury does go into a retrograde in Scorpio, I think for you, this is going to be an opportunity to just throttle down a little bit with these big changes going on, these big power politics, and just come into your own space, do a bit of thinking and research, and take it in your stride. The new moon of the 16th clashes with Saturn and Pluto. So it could be a question of taste. There may be someone in a group situation who's absolutely very into politics and a bit of a backstabber, quite frankly. So if you work in a group or you work with people that have very different values to you, it could be a bit of an uncomfortable process. However, from the 18th to the 24th, Venus forges an awesome angle to Pluto. And if you do want to meet somebody new, or there is someone in your life that you truly value, the depth of feeling that can be generated by that aspect is truly brilliant. On the 23rd, the Sun moves into Scorpio, propping up the retrograde to Mercury. That's going to be really helpful. And if you do feel you need to break out, especially if there has been these dark energies oppressing you, this would be a fabulous time to go off and do something really different, independent, adventurous, travel to somewhere that's exotic or very stimulating. Get with the people you find exciting. It will be so good for you. On the 28th, however, Mercury does reverse back into Libra, and on the same day, Venus moves into this location. But that can also trigger some kind of financial benefit to you, and also a lustiness within you that might surprise you. The full moon, as I said before, the second full moon, the blue moon, occurs on the 31st, and in Taurus, this is about how you think. So for 2 weeks coming into November, there may be some conversations, perhaps untangling some of the politics of this month. And the key for us all is to continue to try to listen and comprehend. Communication isn't just talking, it is comprehending. As you come into November, the retrograde to Mercury in Libra continues. This could be about a shared financial situation. Really stay on the case. Remember, the full moon on the last day of last month shines its energies into the first 2 weeks of this month. So there's some conversations to be had. Emails and text messages can be going backwards and forwards. Perhaps it is something to do with a litigation or a deal or an insurance matter, which you need to really be vigilant around. But by the 11th, Mercury returns to Scorpio. And if you have got that desire to be more expansive, this is really going to help the process. Also, on the 14th, Mars starts to go forwards. And it's going to be going forwards now right through to the 6th of January 2021. So this is giving you permission to get cracking again on trying to improve your financial situation, your sense of self-worth, or just the firming up of your foundations of your world. Or if you are feeling that you want to be more lusty, this is certainly going to give you a real thrust forwards. The new moon, which occurs on the 15th in Scorpio, is absolutely gorgeous for you. And the reason for that is it's angling up to Neptune in your sign. Your imagination can really be boosted by this. So if you are expanding your horizons or going somewhere different on a holiday or a vacation, you're going to absorb the experience like never before. But remember, that's going to be part of your experience all this year anyway, due to the conjunction between the moon and Neptune in your sign at the start of the year. On the 19th, Mercury comes out of shadow. So something that you've been waiting to hear news from should be settled by then. But if it hasn't been, it will be by then. The 22nd sees the sun power its way into the expansive Sagittarius, which for you is all about career. It's about your goals and ambitions. On the same day, Venus moves into Scorpio. So there could be some travel linked to your ambitions, or it could be where you live. If you've often thought about living overseas, this would be a perfect time to think about it if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford it. And the 29th sees Neptune goes forward. So Neptune going backwards in your sign, it's a very eroding influence. It's very retrospective. It's very much to do with the past. And it can be distorting as well as hugely spiritual and enchanting. So I think going forwards helps you. And the 30th sees an annular lunar eclipse in Gemini, which for you is back in your home zone. So it's basically just saying to you, as you make your pitch for those goals and ambitions, keep in focus your need to support yourself and stay appreciative of the people who supply your support systems, be it physical or emotional. And this brings us into December, the final month of this year. And on the 3rd, Mercury powers in to join up with the Sun in Sagittarius. Now, Mercury is in detriment in the sign of Sagittarius, but I think this can see you surprisingly busy around work, ambitions, interacting with notable people, raising your profile. Now, there is a truly significant moment on the 14th of December, because then we have a total solar eclipse, but it forges an amazing link to Mars in your second solar house, so 10th, second houses. This is just wonderful for you. So it's late in the year and the focus for many may be turning to the festivities. But as you burst into 2021, believe me, you are going to be strutting your stuff in the most confident and also successful way. It's just absolutely magical. Now, it is true that Venus is going to be joining up with Sagittarius on the 16th, and that suggests that there may be some meetings to be had. There may be that you can use your natural charm to good effect. But the 17th sees Saturn go into Aquarius again. So for the next 2.25 years, it is going to be going through a deeply sensitive part of your scope. This could be a time when you really do embrace the more subconscious, the shadow side of your nature like never before. If you're interested in personal development, this will be like food and water to you. If you're someone who's a bit resistant, that you may have some vulnerabilities, it could be a bumpier journey. But the fact that Jupiter is moving on the 20th with Saturn is something to really appreciate, because Jupiter can bring some really spiritual dimensions, extra enhanced views of worlds and channels of energy and really special people into your world as this year comes to a close and 2021 dawns. But as this year actually ends, we have a full moon. And it's a full moon in the most playful part of your scope. So I think as the curtain comes down on this year, you may want to be playing host to a gathering in your new residency or being with your closest kinship family members. But I do feel that you'll be looking back on this year and thinking, wow, what a year. But if you'd like to know how it will impact on you as an absolutely individual person, rather than just on your zodiac sign or ascendant, please click the link beneath this video, because you can receive your 12-month forecast, get 30% off. If you order it in 2019, you'll get the rest of 2019 free. If you order it in 2020, you'll get a full 12 months from the point of order. But for now, wishing you the very best of luck, Pisces, and goodbye.